Shalom Israel. Before I start, I want to give all glory, honor, and praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Mahar Rakakadash, double honors to the elders and apostles in Israel who rule and teach well, to the Akim, to the highways and byways, and those pushing this word in truth, sincerity, to the brothers and sisters in the truth. Now, needed to forgive me, I'm a bit wheezy on the chest, don't know why. But I was watching a lesson by Priest Daniel Allah. This is the lesson: Christians are having a bad week, based on Galatians chapter 1 and chapter 2. The Elders channel is Maccabees TV, so watch and subscribe. And this is a good lesson, so if you want to learn about Galatians 1 and 2, check that out. But in it, he mentions that he's going to do a lesson on cultural assimilation. I believe that's next week, he said, so have a look out for that. That should be a good lesson. But that prompted me to do a topic on cultural assimilation, because we read about Gentiles in the New Testament, and Christians straight away, when they hear the word Gentiles, straight away they think non-Israelite, not realizing that Israelites, through various means, took on the customs of these other nations and became known as Gentiles by the Israelites that was keeping up Torah, so that was keeping the laws. And I just wanted to go through some scriptures showing that, but I also wanted to touch what that term meant. Now, cultural assimilation, it says cultural assimilation is a process by which a group of people adopt the values, behaviors, and beliefs of another group. It can affect individuals or entire groups and can occur gradually or quickly. And if you look at us now, like we've cultural assimilated into the various nations that we are amongst, and it says the types of assimilation. So you've got full assimilation, voluntary assimilation, and forced assimilation. And I just want to go through some of these and show you these things. So like in the scriptures, and how our people, became to be known as Corinthians, Ephesians, Greeks, etc. So it says forced assimilation. It says when a group is forced to give up their identity. Now, an example of that is what we went through in the last main slavery that our people went through. We were taken from, the west coast of Africa and other areas, and transported to different countries, and was forced to take on the customs, ideologies, and ways of that nation that had us captive. Now, I don't know if any of you remember in Roots, he had Kunta Kinte, he's being whipped and was forced to take on the name Toby. Yeah, so that's a form of forced assimilation. But I just want to show that in the scriptures. This is, hold on, let me go for them. Got forced assimilation. You got voluntary assimilation. It says when a group integrates into the dominant culture over time. So this is done willingly. And then full assimilation. And that would be based on these two over time. Over a period of time, you'll get the full assimilation. So you may have taken on the custom by force or voluntary. Then you've had children who's had children, and over time you're teaching them the customs and ways of the society that you're in. And that's how the full assimilation come along. Like us today, we would have been in a full assimilation situation. That's how we would have been. If you're looking at us today, we didn't go through the force like our foreparents during slavery. They were forced. So it says voluntary assimilation, when a group integrates into the dominant culture over time. So when we go to like First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 11. It says, in those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrows. So this device pleased them well. Silakia. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. It says, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised. Yeah, how? Uncircumcised in heart, because if they were Jews, more than likely they would have been circumcised in the flesh. But over time, by the time you reach this stage of full assimilation, a lot of them would probably have been literally uncircumcised, which is what we read about at times in the New Testament, where they wanted the Gentiles coming in to be circumcised. So it says, and made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief. So this is a form of voluntary assimilation where, without any force being put upon them, they chose to take on the ways and the customs of these other nations. Now, another example of that is 2 Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 7 says, but after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus called Epiphanes took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Anias, labored on the hand to be high priest. It says, beside this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set him up a place for exercise and for the training up of youth in the fashions of the heathen. So he's teaching these youths, the ways of the heathens, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochus. So not only was he teaching them their ways and customs, he was also calling them by the name of that area, Antiochia. Yeah, he was calling them Antiochians. Says, when the king had granted, Salakia, and he had gotten into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to the Greekish fashion. Yeah, so this is another form of what would be known as voluntary assimilation. It says, when a group integrates into the dominant culture over time. Now, we see forced assimilation. Yeah, when a group is forced to give up their identity. Go back to First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 41. There's moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion. So this here would be a form of voluntary assimilation, and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strained laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beast, and that they should also leave their children uncircumcised. Yeah, so going back to what I was speaking about in the New Testament, when they wanted those Gentiles to circumcise, yeah, this is one of how some of them became uncircumcised, through being forced, and then over time it became a custom, like many of our people today from the western side of the world, grew up not being circumcised in the flesh. It says that whereas a number of our brothers and sisters, our brothers then, Slovakia, who come from the West Coast, a number of them are actually circumcised. It says that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end they might forget the law, which is the purpose of assimilation, yeah, and change all the ordinances. And here we go, here's the fourth bit. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. Yeah, so that's how a number of our people were forced. I read on, it says, in the self same manner wrote he to his whole kingdom and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, everyone that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land, and drove the Israelites into secret places. These were those who chose to take on the customs, and that's how the Maccabees, yeah, these were those who chose not to take on the customs, yeah, and so they were driven into secret places. When you read that through the Maccabees, and that's how the Maccabees actually came about, because they stood for the laws of their fathers. It says, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could file for succor. Yeah. Now there's another one, I believe. So like this second Maccabees. Basically covering the same thing I just read. The second Maccabees 3 and 6. Yeah, so this is second Maccabees chapter 6. I'll start for the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles, who dallied with harlots and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for man to keep the Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself to be a Jew. So if you was forced to not call yourself an Israelite, what do you be calling yourself? Going back to the example I gave with Roots, where Kunta Kinte was forced to call yourself Toby. So if we weren't able to call ourselves Jews, what would we be calling ourselves? In this case, it would be Greeks, or the name of whatever Greek island colony we dwelt in. So it says verse 7, and in the day of the king's birth every month they were brought by a bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices, and when the feast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled, were forced to go in procession to Bacchus carrying ivy. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews, that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices. And here we go. So this is a forced assimilation now. It says, and whosoever would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles should be put to death. Then might a man had seen the present misery. Yeah, so it says those who would not take on the customs of the Gentiles will be put to death. So going back to this, we're seeing the scriptures examples of voluntary assimilation, and we see forced assimilation. Now, over time, during these two simulation, if you had children, growing them up in the ways of the heathens, they'll have children growing them up in the way of the heathens, then this is how the full assimilation would come about. It says when a group becomes indistinguishable from the majority group, yeah, there's no difference. And we know that in the New Testament, we had Israelites who knew they were Israelites, were calling Israelites who took on the customs of these other nations Gentiles. This is John chapter 7 and verse 34. And this is red letters here. John 7:34, ye shall seek me and shall not find me, and where I am, there ye cannot come. Then said the Jews among themselves, yeah, where will he go that we should not find him? Yeah, so they're saying, where's Christ going to go that we should not find him? Will he go onto the dispersed? Now, who are the dispersed? Oh, sugar. I don't think it's a diaspora, but yeah, so it says, will he go into the dispersed, a scattering dispersion of Israelites among foreign nations? Yeah, that's who the dispersed are. And those Christians will still be the Israelites. So they're saying, where will he go that we should not find him? Will he go onto the dispersed, the scattered Israelites? Yeah, where are they? Among the Gentiles, yeah, and teach the Gentiles. So these scattered Israelites were being referred to as what? Gentiles, because over time, some were forced, some took on the customs voluntary, but over time, some fully assimilated, meaning they grew up in the ways and customs of the Gentiles, these other nations that they were amongst. So when we come to scriptures like Ephesians chapter 2, I'll start 11, for we are his workmanship, created in Mashiach Yahweh Shai unto good works, yeah, which is what? Keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, which the Most High had before ordained that we should walk therein, which is law, statutes, and commandments. Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, meaning what? Before, you found out who you were, or before you came back to your customs, yeah, that was ordained before you, ordained before for you, you were what? Walking as Gentiles in the flesh, yeah, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called circumcision. So we see here in John, yeah, where the Jews, the circumcision, was calling the uncircumcision Gentiles. Yeah. So it says, wherefore remember, Ephesians 2:11, that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. Yeah. Quickly see if I can find something. If not, I think that's Romans 12. Yeah, Romans 12 and verse 2 says, ye know that ye were Gentiles. Now, it says, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. So what made them Gentiles? The customs that they were keeping up. Some of them were read about in the Maccabees. That they might forget their law. What did they? No, that's the wrong one. First Maccabees. Yeah, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings. No, the others keeping what? Bacchus. Slovakia. So we're setting up altars, groves, chapels, and idols. Yeah. So this is 1 Corinthians 12:2. Ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. Because what? Some of us became Gentiles through forced assimilation, through voluntary assimilation, or over time, it became full assimilation where we grew up not knowing anything else but the ways of those Gentiles and calling ourselves Salakia Gentiles. Now this is cultural assimilation on Wikipedia. It says cultural assimilation is a process by which a person or a group's language and or culture Salakia come to resemble those of another group. The term is used to refer to both individuals and groups, and in the latter case, it can refer to either immigrant diasporas. This is why coming back to John chapter 7 and verse 35, you see Israelites being referred to, the diaspora being referred to as Gentiles. Yeah. So it says, and in the latter case, it can refer to either immigrant diasporas or native residents that come to be culturally dominated by another society. It says assimilation may involve either a quick or gradual change depending on circumstances of the group. It says full assimilation occurs when new members of a society become indistinguishable from members of the other group. So like us today now, calling ourselves various, Caribbean, West African, Black British, African American, Puerto Rican, so on and so forth, keeping up the customs of those nations, it says, become indistinguishable from the members of the other group. Yeah, no difference between us. Whether or not it is desirable for an immigrant group to assimilate is often disputed by both members of the group and those of the dominant society. Yeah, so coming back. So it says impact of assimilation. Cultural assimilation can result in the loss of a group's original cultural identity. Yeah. It says cultural assimilation can result in the loss of a group's cultural identity. And refer back to us today. Before we came into this truth, we were calling ourselves Caribbean, West Africans, Mexicans, African American, Puerto Ricans, Native American, Indians, so on and so forth. Yeah, because what? We had lost our original cultural identity. Us today, it would have been through full assimilation where, our parents, they had the ways of the various nations that we grew up amongst, calling themselves of those nations. So they named us and we were named, calling ourselves of that same nation. And we grew up in the customs. But all of that stemmed from forced and voluntary assimilation, like we read in the scriptures. So this is Galatians 2 and 2 says, this one I want. Galatians 2 and 3. But neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised, because he grew up not being circumcised. And that will go back to what we read in First Maccabees, chapter 1, where it says that they should also leave their children uncircumcised. So over time, through it now becoming a full assimilation, he would have grown up not having been circumcised. It says, but neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to circumcise. Now, we know that he was an Israelite. Same with Cornelius, says he was a Greek. So we'll go to that now. Yeah. It says Elaine, it says a Greek either by nationality, yeah, whether a native of the mainland or of the Greek islands or colonies. So, you didn't have to grow up in Greece to be deemed a Greek. If you grew up in one of the Greek islands or the colonies, you were also referred to as a Greek. Now, I typed in Greek colonies, yeah. It says the Apostle Paul visited several Greek colonies, including Athens, Corinth, and Crete during his travels, showing you that we had Israelites in these areas calling themselves Athens, Corinthians, and Cretes. I think. Let me see something. Acts 11, I believe. So, okay. Yeah, so this is Acts 11. So this is after Paul come from Cornelius. He was an Israelite and is explaining to the apostles what had happened. So Acts 11 and 18, when they heard these things, they held their peace and glorified. Yeah, you can read down, but this is him explaining to the apostles what happened. It says, now when they heard these things, they held their peace and glorified the Most High, saying, then as the Most High also to the Gentiles granted repentance unto life. So in verse 18, yeah, they're referring to these people as Gentiles. Verse 19, now they which were scattered abroad upon the persecution that arose about Stephen traveled as far as Phoenice and Cyprus and Antioch, preaching the word to none but unto the Jews only. So in verse 18, they're referred to as Gentiles, but then verse 19, it tells you they was only preaching to the Jews. Yet going back to Cornelius in Acts 10. Quickly go back there. You know what happened with Cornelius, but let me go straight to the point. I start verse 35 because this is where Christians like to, open it out to everybody and say, oh, well, he was a non-Israelite. It says, but in every nation, he that feareth him, yeah, speaking about the Israelites in every nation, those that fear him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. Watch this. The word which the Most High sent unto the children of Israel, preaching peace by Yahushua Mashiach is Lord of all. So what word? Everything that we read before, yeah, this is what it's referring to. Yeah, and who was that sent to? The children of Israel. So coming back to chapter 11 and 18, you see that our people were referred to as Gentiles. But then verse 19 says they were preaching the word to none but unto the Jews only. And says, and some of them were men of Cyprus and Cyrene, which, when they were come to Antioch, spake unto the Grecians. Who were these Grecians in Antioch? 2 Maccabees 4 and 9. 2 Maccabees 4 and 9. Besides this, he promised to assign 150 more if he might have license to set him up a place for exercise and for the training up of the youth in the fashions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem, the youths of Jerusalem, by the name of Antiochans, which when the king had granted and he had gotten into his hand a rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to the Greekish fashion. So coming back to Acts chapter 11 and 20, and some of them were men of Cyprus and Cyrene, which when they were come to Antioch, we had Israelites there calling themselves Antiochans, spake unto the Grecians. So these Antiochans were referred to as Grecians. Why? Because they took on, our people took on the Greekish fashion, calling themselves Antiochans, but they were Israelites. Spake unto Grecians, preaching the Lord Yahweh Shai. So coming back to this now, when it says Greek, Titus was referred to as a Greek. He was an Israelite who grew up as a Greek, or probably lived also in one of the Greek colonies or islands. It says a Greek either by nationality, whether a native of the mainland or of the Greek islands or colonies. And you see in 2 Maccabees that our people was calling themselves Antiochian and took on Greek fashions. It says, in a wider sense, the name embraces all nations, not Jews. Now, when it says not Jews, it means those that wasn't keeping the laws, statutes, and commandments. Because we showed you that Israelites in John 7, dispersed, were referred to as Gentiles. So it says, in a wider sense, the name embraces all nations, not Jews, that made the language, customs, and learning of the Greeks their own. And this is how you know it's, that's right when I said not the Israelites that was keeping the commandments, because 2 Maccabees told you that we had Israelites calling themselves Antiochans, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochans, and they were keeping up the Greek fashions. And First Maccabees, others were forced to take on the customs, leave their laws, so they were keeping up Greek customs, and to follow, they should follow the strange laws of the land, leave their children uncircumcised. And let me see something in this. Weren't able to keep the Sabbath or the feast days, or even to call yourself a Jew. So when it comes back to this now, and it says, in a wider sense, the name embraces all nations, not Jews. Those are Israelites that were keeping the laws, because they wouldn't refer to themselves as Greeks, that made the language, because they weren't keeping up the language, they were keeping up the customs of the Israelites, which would be the laws, statutes, and commandments, or Torah, that made the language, customs, and learning of the Greeks their own. First Maccabees 1. Second Maccabees chapter 4, where we took on their customs and ways. And this is how it says, their own, the primary reference is to a difference of religion and worship. So coming back to this now, cultural assimilation, and read that again. It says, cultural assimilation is a process by which a group of people adopt the values, behaviors, and beliefs of another group. It can affect individuals or entire groups, and can occur gradually or quickly. And the various forms is forced assimilation, which hopefully was shown, voluntary, which hopefully was shown, and full assimilation, which was explained and shown, where you got Titus being referred to as a Greek. even what's his name? Let's see. Cornelius. There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band. Now, it wasn't an Italian. That's the group that he was with. Yeah, it says he was from Caesarea, if I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah, he said, "Oh, see," and another place they'll go to say he wasn't an Israelite. I think it's verse 28. Yeah, and he said unto him, "Ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or to come unto one of another nation." So this is another bit they'll use to say, you see, he wasn't of the nation of the Jews. But Cornelius would have been of the southern kingdom, Salakia, the northern kingdom. And without going into it, the kingdom was split in two. And according to prophecy, yeah, one of the reasons Christ came will be to help fulfill this, which will be fulfilled fully when he returns. But this is Ezekiel, just strained slightly. I just want to explain why Peter would refer to Cornelius as another nation, because a lot of people don't realize or choose to be ignorant to the fact that after the kingdom split, we became two nations and two kingdoms. So if you read, it says the reunion of Judah and Israel. So as you read down, it speaks about the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom becoming one. Then verse 22, the purpose, and I will make them one nation in the land. I start 21, Ezekiel 37:21, and say unto them, thus saith the Lord power, behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whether they be gone, and will gather them on every side, and bring them into their own land, and I will make them one nation, yeah, in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all, and they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms anymore. So after the split, we became two nations and two kingdoms, which is why Peter is referring to Cornelius as one of another nation, because Peter would have been of the southern kingdom and Cornelius was of the northern kingdom. But yeah, Lord willing, this was edifying, just trying to show how our people became known as Greeks. So when you read like the Ephesians, the Corinthians, the Galatians, I think I did a lesson as well, going through those chapters showing you that, these people were Israelites. But yeah, this is how people became Gentiles, through the various forms of assimilation, which is in the scriptures. And, we can see throughout time that this is something that has happened to us as a people, also fulfilling a prophecy, Jeremiah 17. Jeremiah 17:4, which I'd say this is more fulfilled in our time and part fulfilled back around the time of Yahushua and Paul. Says Jeremiah 17:4, and thou, even thyself, shall discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee. And we know this weren't speaking about Jeremiah. This is a future prophecy, because Jeremiah knew who he was. Yeah. And there's no way we read in the scriptures where, Jeremiah didn't know who he was at any point. Not that I've come across. I can be corrected on that, but I've not come across that. It says, and thou, even thyself, shall discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not. Yeah, which is more for our time today. But, that part happened under the Greeks. Yeah, I'll say really from the Greeks, we started to discontinue from who we were as a people due to the forced assimilation that was put upon us, or the voluntary assimilation. It says, for ye have kindled a fire in mine anger, which shall burn forever. I will amram. So yeah, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. Like I said, go and check out watch and subscribe to the Elders channel. Priest Daniel Allah. Okay. Yeah. Maccabees. Now you can check out this lesson as well. It's a good lesson on Galatians 1 and 2. Yeah. But yeah, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. With that, I'm going to close out. I'm going to give all glory, honor, and praises to Yahweh, Hashem, Yahushai, Wahar, Rakar, Kadash, Kwam Yasha Allah.